Go.
Hello and welcome to Cathy and Dave's Hobby Hangout. So this is our third one. Will we keep it a bit tighter?
I very much doubt it.
Let's be realistic. But yes, so we are basically doing some sort of crafty hobby type thing and also talking about some stuff. And so we'll be talking about X-Men, and I say we, it will probably mostly be Dave, as that is one of his sort of special subjects.
I'm not quite a mastermind specialist subject, but
okay, well it certainly seems like it to the layman. So yes. But first, so yes, I'm Captain Dave. Should be fairly obvious, hopefully. Yes. So, what are you making or doing today?
What am I doing today? I am making a giant robot. I am making...
That happens reasonably regularly.
I haven't done for a while. Sazabi. It is a Gundam. Actually, no, it's not a Gundam. It is a mobile suit from the Japanese show Mobile Suit Gundam, the original. It was from the OVA Char's Counterattack. It's the personal giant robot of Char Aznable, the Red Comet. It's quite big.
Okay.
And quite awesome.
Right. I feel like I thought that went over my head. But
yeah, it's from the original, series from the 70s.
Okay. Is that what it looks like? It has flares?
No, it's just got big thrusters underneath it.
It just also has really wide trousers compared to other giant robots. So
Okay.
in 70s flares.
Not quite, no.
Okay, sure.
I was going to say, for those who've seen previous ones, or at least, you know, I can show you how far I was getting with my... Anyway,
That's one you were doing last time.
these are the guys that I put together the first time. And I've been painting. So. There we go. Anyway, yes.
I am continuing to sew my swan. I've now, since last time I've put the body on, I've also put the beak on. And I'm currently sort of sewing the black bit that swans have over their beaks. I don't know what it's called. I'm not an ornithologist. If anyone wants to tell me, that's fine. But yes, so that's what I'm doing right now. So hopefully the main body of the swan will be basically finished after. So I was putting an eye on as well. I've got little tiny beads. Can't really see. I've got little tiny beads which I'm using for the bird's eyes. So, yes. I also wanted to, because I think Dave's probably going to talk a little bit more in this episode, I also want to show you something that I've made previously, or recently finished, which is, this is a house. It's a soft book house. I wasn't really familiar with the term soft book before I did this. But basically, in late March, I sort of went through a lot of the fabric that I have, which is mostly felt and mostly quite small pieces of felt, like A4 or smaller, and I kind of laid it all out and took some pictures and said, oh look, I've got all of this, I can probably make something with it, you know, because lockdown. And then somebody who I'm friends with mostly on Facebook linked to a company called Rebecca Page, who I think mostly do kind of dressmaking, clothes making stuff, but they're doing like a stash buster sew along, and especially you signed up, you got to download the pattern, and it must have been late March because you were still able to go to a library and actually print it out, because we don't have a printer in the house.
I think it was when I snuck in to do the laptops, I did it for you.
Okay, sure. I don't know if you should
it was just at the start of lockdown.
But alright, yeah, it was early
My
on.
line manager knew I was doing it.
Okay, sure. Well, I've just given a game about printing, thinking about it, but never mind. Yes, so I had all these bits of paper stick together in a big pattern and stuff, and I ended up ordering some fabric because so it's American, so some of the wording's a bit different, but then basically you got 5 days of videos showing you how to make the house and different rooms in the house. So some of those, but it actually took me, so I sort of started it in, I think it was early sort of April, and then I sort of do bits of it at a time and stop, but it kind of got me back into sewing with the sewing machine, because I have a sewing machine from my, which originally belonged to my great aunt, which I hadn't used for years and years, although I had, have used it before, so it kind of got me back into that. So yeah, it's a little house, and then the reason I've only just finished it now is because these little flowers are buttons, so you can unbutton them, and they're reversible, so you can have like 2 purple or too yellow or anything. But I didn't know how to do buttonholes, so I kind of spent a month just like being avoidant from buttonholes, which are quite tricky, and you have to change your foot and stuff like that. And in fact, when I told my mother when I showed her this finally done, she sort of pulled a bit of a face on buttonholes. So I don't think it's something she finds particularly fun either. But yes, there's the front of the house. Again, I had to just use what fabric was big enough because a lot of my fabric's quite small. And then this is this is like a little fishing pond. So there's little fishies that go in different bits of the pond, and then you can also put the last thing I made was this bear, which was a pattern which goes with it. So the bear can go in the fishing hole, or he can go in the tent, which there's fallen out of the pond. Okay, it's quite like the tent. So I had to put backing on the moon because you can't have stars in the dark bit of the moon. It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, the tent has flaps, and it also has a little sleeping bag. And then at the back, I started to do an outsidey theme one. It's got a log fire, campfire.
Man up sewing machine foot, not actual foot.
Yes, there's a foot is part of a sewing machine, and if you want to do buttonholes, you need a different one to the standard one you'd use for most other stuff. So yeah. Although when I showed, my son had seen this, so it's sort of him. It's mostly for me to do, if I'm honest. But he's here and he plays with it. But when I first put out, because he's recently gone back to nursery, which is a bit of a relief for some of my really busy days of work. He's only there 2 days a week, but it helps. So I thought I'd put this out, and he came back. But I'd asked him, because you can also do a cat or a mouse sort of dolly. And he was just like, oh look, it's finished. And he's a bit like, where's the cat and the mouse? I want the cat and the mouse. I'm like, well, fine then. I'll probably do the mouse later. I'm not sure I'm going to do the cat, because there's not many places to put them all. So,
Bethan likes the bear.
Oh, cool, yes. He has quite sparkly, I don't think if that's coming up on camera. His eyes are sparkly buttons, because our son quite likes these sparkly buttons that I have in a sort of selection of buttons that I was given. Which I think was from Kate, actually, but yes. So yeah, anyway. So that's something I've done, and then I'm still working on my swan now. Okay, so what have you read recently?
I'm currently reading... if I don't look up a lot, it's because I'm using a sharp knife and don't want to cut myself.
I think that would change the rating on the video.
Somewhat,
yes.
Somewhat. I'm currently reading the sequel to the Dragon book that I plugged first time, yes. The Legion of Flame is the current book I'm reading. But I won't talk about that, because that's a sequel. Sure. Instead, I will talk about comics.
Isn't that what you're doing for most of the rest?
No.
Okay.
Well, it kind of ties in. I've recently finished, recently read some of my rather large backlog of comics. I read the 2 recent Iceman miniseries written by Sienna Grace, which were both very good, dealing with, so for those who may not be up to date with current X-Men continuity.
We don't have time for all of that.
No, we don't have time for that. A few years ago, Bobby Drake, Iceman, came out as gay, which caused some consternation amongst the fan base. Mainly those that really
like the old-fashioned
shut up
type ones.
If you look back at his character, it does make sense. It's not one of these. They've gone, look, let's just make something. No, actually, it makes perfect sense. Admittedly, he was outed by his time-displaced past self. So that's quite comic.
I thought a telepath mind read him and kind of made him come out, which people said wasn't the best coming out. Someone kind of pushed on him.
No,
okay.
but the fact that his time-displaced younger self had already came out, yeah, it gets complicated.
There's going to be more of this sort of thing because we're doing X-Men. So
anyway, but yes, those they were very good. They were exploring his relationship with his family, with just himself, and just coming to just starting dating and things like that, which was quite cool. And obviously there were supervillains involved, but that wasn't the main.
I think this ties into a question I'm going to ask you later.
Okay, fair enough. There we go. But yes, so those were worth, especially if you like Iceman as a character. I mean, I'm not necessarily so much of a fan, but I did enjoy those.
So the thing that I've most recently finished is Witchmark by C.L. Polk. I don't know how clear any of this is. It's Polk, P-O-L-K. Yeah, C.L., I did get that right. Which was running on a podcast I listened to. Well, I've been listening to podcasts a little bit differently since lockdown, so I'm a bit behind on it, but a little while ago, somebody on the podcast recommended that one as being like a fantasy that's quite a different sort of setting, and I was which I'm always up for. So it's kind of, I don't know if you can see, there's a bicycle on the cover. There are bicycles, yes. So it's kind of, it's not quite steampunk or diesel punk, which I think is like sort of, people start putting punk on things that relate to the main form of transport.
Bicycle pump.
I don't know if that's the thing. It's not quite that. Basically, it's in a world which is kind of like post-war, quite literally, because the whole point is that it's the main character, who's called Miles, is a doctor. He's a psychiatrist in a veterans hospital, and a lot of people coming back from the big war that his country just had. The country also has electricity, which is kind of, it's not called electricity, it's called ether, but it functions like electricity. So you've got, electric lights, you've got radio, you have cars, which I think are also somehow powered by ether. But it's kind of like, not everyone has electricity, but it's coming from, it's reasonably common, but still quite new. Except it's called ether. It's not actually electricity, but that sort of kind of power source. And you also have, people have cars, but I think they're for the wealthy. A lot of people have bicycles, and there's a whole bicycle etiquette to it, but people also have carriages as well, so it's kind of like that sort of mix of stuff. So Miles works in a veterans hospital. He himself is a veteran of this same war. With the country, his country's called, I think it's Eland. Not quite sure how to pronounce it. It's fairly kind of Englishy seeming. And then they just fought against a country called Lanier. So what happens is that a man who says he's been poisoned is brought in by a stranger who kind of like found him in the street. And insists he go there, and then the guy can clearly see Miles' big secret because Miles is a witch. And in this society, witches are not allowed, or people who do magic. And then anyone who's accused of being a witch kind of gets sent to a trial, and then you get sent to an asylum, basically, because they all go mad. Or at least that's what everyone is told. And then as this man dies, he is also a witch, and he sort of puts some power into Miles, and Miles is all a bit confused. And then he realises that the bloke brought him in, who's called Tristan, he saw the whole thing. So he goes to his office, and he thinks he's going to be blackmailed, because obviously that's what would happen. Except then it turns out Tristan also has magic, but is quite unusual, and offers to teach Miles how to kind of like hide what he is and do some lessons if he'll help investigate the murder. So it's kind of a sort of fantasy mystery, and they're investigating the murder of this guy, Nick. That was Nick. It's also sort of a romance as well, because it's sort of about these two characters meet and how they get closer, despite there being a mystery and stuff. There's also most about Miles and his secrets, because that's not his only secret. Miles has quite a lot of secrets, and then his kind of family background suddenly comes back at him, and the stuff that he'd run away from home to escape suddenly it envelops him. And there's also kind of like a big wider thing, like the truth about the war and the country. So it's got quite a few sort of bits to it, as it's all told from the point of view of Miles, who's he's a pretty good character. The kind of like romance subplot works really well, so does the mystery and stuff. It's just quite a nice fun book with some sort of seriously bits in, because there's a lot of stuff about like people coming back from the war and the effect that has on people, and there's a lot of stuff about like illness and mental health, because Miles's talent is that he's a healer. He can see the illness in people, but obviously he has to hide all the time, so he has to treat them medically, even though he can see more than he should be able to. So it's quite interesting. I really enjoyed it. Went through it quite quickly. The thing I'm currently reading is a collection of James White books. So the collection is called Alien Emergencies. The book I'm reading, I think, is it Star Healer? Yeah, Star Healer. So this big book belongs to our friend Tim, who lent me this one and a load of other collections of James White books in the Sector General series, which James White, who was an Irish author, wrote from, I think, the late 60s through to possibly the early noughties or something. I'm not quite sure, but there's loads of them, but they're on the short side for novels. Obviously, they were starting being written in the 60s or 70s, when novels tend to be a little bit shorter, I understand. And I don't usually read like a ton of sci-fi, and I usually read more modern stuff written by women, if I'm entirely honest. That's the sci-fi I tend to enjoy. But this particular sort of series was mentioned by Alistair Stewart, who is a very good fan writer. His work should be checked out if you enjoy reading about, science fiction, horror, or fantasy. But he recommended the series as one where it's sort of like science fiction, but it's all about care. So again, this is all set in a hospital. Sector General is a massive hospital for all kinds of life forms and beings, to the point where it's got different environments, different pressures, different gravities in it. All the staff have to get used to working in this environment with all other people have completely different physiologies, and there's lots of about going out and solving medical problems. So it's kind of, he was talking about in the line of being kind of like sometimes Star Trek Next Gen, or other things where it's a bit like, we're a team of people and we're going to use our competence and we're going to solve this problem and make things better. Obviously this is mostly a kind of medical thing, but so there's usually a little bit of a mystery in each story about what's happening and then how do we fix it, and they have to come up with a novel solution. They're fairly good, considering it's older sci-fi. I was a little wary going in. There is a bit of kind of ignoring and not exactly representing the experience or existence sometimes of women. There is one main character who's female. I think others might identify as that, but it has a tendency to say himself or itself when describing the whole range of beings and species there might be. And also there's this ongoing and quite irritating insistence that there's certain things that medical staff can do to progress. Oh, but Earth human women can't because they're psychologically incapable of doing this particular thing. And I was like, okay, it's in the previous story. And then this most recent one, the one female character, who's sort of the main Earth human in it, who we know is very attractive to Earth human men. We don't really know anything else about. Trait. We don't. Well, she's not been specifically described, so I guess. I think she's curvy. That's all I've got. But yeah, it's all kind of what they react to her like, not what she actually looks like. But she's also kind of the wife of the main Viewpoint character, but kind of them being married was just, it's kind of more about the mission than the people, so it just gets skipped over. So we're married now, and I was like, oh, is that what happened at the end of the last book? I just thought they kind of had a chat about their relationship. All right. But yeah, so there's a bit where she's a bit annoyed that she can't progress because she's told, oh no, Earth human women can't do this, nor any female equivalents in other species. And I'm like, oh yes, that would be how that works. So that's a bit of an annoyance. But again, for older SF, it seems pretty good.
Could be a lot worse.
Sure. But yes, that's me. So yes, that's all the readings and stuff. So as we've already mentioned, our topic today is X-Men, which, as most people will probably be aware, is a very long-running series of many series of comic books from Marvel. It's also been various TV shows and movies, and probably some games
computer
as well.
Games. It's one of.
They had some T-shirts and a hoodie. It was plenty of merch.
It was at one point Marvel's biggest selling line was the X-Men line.
And then they sold the film rights to, was it Fox?
It was Fox because they
haven't got back from saying that was just Spider-Man.
Oh, well, they were zoomed on the X on each of the films.
Oh, I literally never noticed that.
Okay.
Oh, also, for the entirety of this episode, if we say any word that sounds like it begins with X, even if it's EX, like exciting or something, what you have to imagine is the E isn't there and the X is capitalised, because that's their whole thing. Or the E
is there, but the X is still capitalised.
Yeah. Anything that makes an X sound.
Yeah.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Is a capital X. And there might be a hyphen, so yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. So X-Men started in the 60s, written by Stan Lee and illustrated by...
Wasn't it Jack Kirby? Or...
No, it wasn't Kirby.
Oh, it wasn't Kirby.
I cannot remember now.
You did not do your prep.
I did not do my prep. And it ran for the sort of the first Bronze Age of X-Men. Yeah, okay. That's how they are.
Bronze Age, when they learned how to smelt.
Yeah. Also, basically, the early stuff isn't actually that good.
Dave showed me a little bit of it, and they're a bit like, oh look, there's a lady.
Let's put it this way.
Let's just gather around her.
The introduction of Jean.
Her. Is that all right?
The introduction of Jean Grey is cringeworthy. It really is not. Yeah.
Like, if that's how it actually was back then, I feel very bad for all women in the 60s. But look, it's a lady. Let us bother her incessantly.
I mean, she, you know,
this is a school.
She was the only female on the
token, obviously, yes, token lady.
So obviously, most of the male characters were interested in her.
Except not Iceman, who, as we now know, is gay.
No,
I thought he was younger and also
he
a
was
snowman.
younger and
he used to look like a snowman.
Yeah,
he looked fluffy. Like they drawn him like snow, but he looked a bit like he's also made of cotton wool.
So anyway,
except for his boots, he had boots on.
Oh, Mano, you tell me if you Google it and tell me. I didn't think it was Kirby, but I will be standing corrected. Anyway,
we have researchers on the case.
Excellent.
No one's told us what the swan thing is, have they?
No one's told us what the swan thing is. Yeah,
that's fine. I can probably Google that later.
So the where it kind of after a while it stopped, and they just went to reprints, and it wasn't huge at the time, but they decided to bring it back after they'd done a few sequences of reprints with Giant Size X-Men #1, which was written by Chris Claremont.
I will say comic numbers don't make any sense. They've been sorting out comics before, and it's just mind-boggling. It's like, who cares what numbers are? Literally none of them.
And this was the one where they introduced the new team of X-Men. So instead, the original 5 X-Men being Iceman, Angel, Beast, Cyclops, and Jean Grey.
And Professor X was there.
And Professor X. Jean Grey generally doesn't have a code name because she's the lady.
Well, they could have just called something girl. That's how it is. It's like, you're a film for something girl.
Okay, thank you, Manuel. It was Jack Kirby.
I sort of seen it was. Everyone's sort of like Lee and Kirby. Okay.
They did a lot.
Well, yeah, no, that's kind of the point, isn't
it? It's I suppose it hasn't got some of the very Kirby-esque space designs that you immediately attribute it to Kirby.
No,
anyway,
too psychedelic.
So Claremont came on board and came up with so they introduced this new team. So basically, the idea is that the original 5 X-Men get captured by, well, it turns out to be an island, but they don't know at the time, and they need. So Professor Xavier goes and gets a new set of X-Men, being some of the characters which we know and love.
Should we explain what X-Men are?
X-Men are mutants. They have the X gene. Don't try looking for it in your biology textbooks. I've tried. Anyone can have the X gene, and it gives you powers, and these powers can be literally anything. I mean, they can be ridiculously powerful or
a
bit rubbish. Yeah. Kind of gotta hope you get one of the good ones. So anyway, so Professor Xavier, the head of the X-Men. Nominally teacher and head teacher at the Xavier Institute for Higher Learning.
He's been played by both Patrick Stewart and James McAvoy. I can't remember his name.
So he finds the next set of X-Men being Storm, Wolverine, Colossus, Nightcrawler. Well, so it's good. Storm, a African goddess who can control the weather. Wolverine, a short Canadian with an attitude, also has the abilities to pop out spikes out of his hands. Healing factor, it's complicated. Colossus,
Big Metal Russian.
Big Metal Russian, yeah. Ability to transform his skin into organic steel. Nightcrawler, a blue furry elf with the ability to teleport and is very acrobatic.
I thought he was kind of demon-y or something.
We don't talk about that arc.
Well, because he looks a bit like a demon, but then immediately he was trying to be a priest at one point.
Yes, but
okay,
it's more amusing because Kitty Pryde refers to him as Fuzzy Elf.
Okay, sure.
pointy ears. Yes, he does look demonic, and yes, there's the story arc where they go into his parentage, which everyone wants to ignore because it isn't the good parentage. But anyway, I can go into that later if you like.
Well, let's see how we go.
Who are we missing? Thunderbird.
I don't think that is.
Yeah, spoiler, he dies very quickly. Native American,
I was going to say,
speed and strength.
It seems like he dies, I'm like, is he a person?
Sunfire, Japanese. Storm's managed to survive.
That's true, yes, Storm, yeah.
Nightcrawler, he's blue, he's a person of colour. He's a different colour. I'll be quiet now on that topic.
It's really a bit confusing, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, it's not. Yeah, I mean, the whole Thunderbird thing sucks because he's killed off in like issue 2.
Oh, that is a bit rubbish.
Yeah. And Sunfire, a fiery Japanese fire person. He throws fire.
What happens to that one? Because again, I don't feel like they're very okay.
He quits.
At least he survived.
It's a plot point for him. He likes quitting a lot.
Okay. I mean, so that's kind of like the basic.
Well, I was going to say,
maybe just condense it a little bit more into broad themes.
Yeah, but a lot of people would not recognise those characters because those are in the films.
Yes.
Also
the TV show.
And the TV shows. Yeah. So anyway, so that's when it took off. It became huge at that point. Mm-hmm. And with storylines like the Dark Phoenix saga and the Brood saga, and there are. It's a massive, and yes, for a long time it was Marvel's biggest selling property. If you look at it now, everyone's a bit surprised. Obviously, they Avengers has been made into the big property in Iron Man, but I mean at the time, Iron Man and the Avengers weren't really that big a deal, mainly because they'd previously sold their biggest licenses off to other companies because they were nearly bankrupt. So they sold...
And now the mouse owns them.
X-Men to Fox. Sony got Fantastic Four and Spider-Man. And
I can't remember which one got Fantastic Four.
Blade. I don't know. Blade. So they sold it because they literally... if they didn't, they would... and the deal was quite good for those companies, to be fair.
Yes, that's why they keep having to remake the films, though, so that they can keep the licenses.
But yes, that's why they have to. But now Fox is now owned by Disney, so therefore
everything's owned by the mouse now. He owns everything. Like our 3-year-old's but like, look, it's Mickey Mouse. He knows who he is. Is he in a cartoon with that guy in? No, he is not, because he's not very interesting.
Hulk.
He doesn't know Bugs Bunny.
I don't know whether they sold the movie rights to Hulk. So I know there's this TV series Lou Ferrigno, but I wasn't sure whether they actually sold the movie rights because there wasn't a whole proper movie.
What? The Ed Norton one?
That was the most.
Yeah, that was in the MCU. Wasn't
yeah, no. Sorry, Kate was saying.
Okay, you probably need to explain what's happening.
Kate was mentioning
making random comments.
Yeah. I mean, I know that no Lou Ferrigno was and so. They might have sold it. Let's be honest. But I can't remember who they sold it to.
Okay, I don't know what you're talking about.
Hulk license.
Oh, okay, right. Yes. Okay.
So.
I'm gonna have to thread the needle. Right. Cool. Right. So So how did you get into X-Men?
Like a lot of people in the '90s TV, the cartoon.
Yes, that is also what I know it from. But I was younger, so I remember watching it, and I just remember watching it quite a bit, and I remember odd plotlines. Like I think I remember the Days of Future Past plotline, which is kind of where they go into an alternate world, where things are much worse, and then people have to do time stuff to make it to their present, which, while not brilliant, is better than sort of like
it's either
repression camps type.
Yeah, So the '90s cartoon. At the time, obviously, there's quite a few of the Marvel series were made in cartoons, and obviously the DC ones as well.
I think a lot of the Marvel ones are on Disney Plus now.
Yes,
the mouse owns everything, but then it's all in one place, so
Not all of them, unfortunately, but not some of the X-Men ones I do want to watch.
Sure.
Okay, I'll get to our researcher in a moment. So the 90s was interesting because it kind of it act as it reinforced each other. So the DC film, the DC comic stuff, the Batman and.
Do you mean like how Harley Quinn was invented for the TV show, but then ended up in the comics?
A little bit, but more the case of they did their own thing. They had their universe, but they did their own.
Sure.
For the most part.
Yes.
Whereas, so they weren't necessarily taking plot lines directly from comic runs.
Oh, okay.
Whereas the X-Men cartoon did. They took plot lines and adapted them. So they did the Dark Phoenix saga.
Days of Future Past.
No, Days of Future Past was the other way round.
Oh, okay. I remember telling you that I saw one where they time traveled and there's an alternate world, and you said, "Oh, it's this." Then you gave me the comic.
Days of Future Past goes the other way, if I remember this correctly. In that they use the death of Senator Kelly to create, the ended up with the Sentinel program in this dark future. They use that to actually springboard the Age of Apocalypse mini-series, whereas we'll put the milk bottles out later.
Yeah, I remember that's there.
Whereas where they had Legion's son, Professor Xavier's son, Legion, go back in time was aiming to kill Magneto, but actually killed Xavier, which resulted in the rise of Apocalypse.
I'm not sure how much. Okay, yes, basically.
Yeah, this is what's going to happen after a bit.
Okay, yeah.
I'll just check my research assistant. Thank you.
We watched one episode of Legion. So the way I got into it is I remember the cartoon, but I was somewhat younger than Dave, so I remember it being on presumably Saturday mornings and quite enjoying it because I just liked watching cartoons, and I still do. And it had quite a fun theme tune. Do 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 do
yeah.
do 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 do. Yeah. Do 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 do. We're not that musical.
So Universal owns the right to Hulk.
Okay, sure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mannel.
Right. So, yes. So yeah, I watched the cartoon series, so I kind of knew roughly who the characters were. And then the films came out later, and I didn't really see them until I came to uni. I think you showed me some. I had DVDs, so I watched those. I was aware of them, sort of roughly knew who the characters were. So it was one of those things that was around. Yes, and then I was going out with you, and you had tons and tons of comic books.
I have a lot of information,
and also
I have almost all the way back for the two main X-Men series, all the way back to the start of the 80s with the wedding of Jean Grey and Scott Summers.
Those two and their families come up a lot, and it is incredibly
very
confusing.
complicated. Yes.
Yes. So that's you into it. I think why did you like it? That's a good thing to ask.
So a lot of people are going to say they like the mutant metaphor.
I have not mentioned mutant metaphor. I thought it'd have to come up at some point.
Yeah. So it's obviously over the years it's been used to kind of highlight, but
as an analogy.
Yeah, as an analogy. Thank you very much.
For a wide variety of different prejudices. Like racism, probably sexism to an extent. Okay, was an original thing. Sexuality is a big one. I guess nowadays it'd be stuff like trans stuff, or just being non-binary. Because I suppose the thing with X-Men is, so the whole thing is that obviously mutants. First of all, they're called mutants, which sounds really, really rude. And then people in the comics would be like, mutie scum, and you're like, these people are bigots. This is what bigots are like. But then there'd also be more subtle stuff. But it's kind of, because on the one hand, it's just like a genetic thing. Like a person can have the X gene and look like anyone, and might not even have particularly impressive power or do anything particular to people, and be of no particular harm to anyone. So mental health problems as well, thinking about as well.
Yeah. Anti-Semitism, as Kate said.
Basically any kind of thing where a dominant group of people are hating on other people because of a characteristic they, have as part of themselves. So it works for... So, yeah, some mutants don't look like mutants. So it's kind of a hidden thing where... Because, people say, you can tell if somebody's gay, or, you can tell, people's genders and stuff like that. But but then also a lot of people say, people are tricking us, or so it's kind of works for the kind of, I guess, less visible or less immediately visible minorities, but also it's visible stuff like obviously people being different races and stuff, and I guess because it's American based, probably particularly African American. Although obviously there's a strong anti-Semitism theme in it as well, because Magneto, who's kind of the main villain, is a Holocaust survivor, which is in many ways a bit of a thing. But I suppose the point is that Magneto came at it as like he's already been persecuted for one part of his identity, and then he is a mutant, he can metal, and he realises, well, there's another part of his identity that he's also being persecuted for, so he's a bit like, we must fight back against our oppressors who will threaten us, and then we need to get on top of them. In comparison to Professor X, he's a bit more like, no, we just need to live together and make peace with people. So it's kind of like different levels of stuff. But obviously, it's comics, so sometimes he's the evil mutant leader. Other times, I think they treat him.
Yeah, I mean, he's got nuance, you know.
It depends which version of Magneto.
It is very
obviously, if it's the films, it's a bit like Magneto wants to, if not kill all the humans, send them all mutants, or at least show them the error of their ways, but like by force, and probably a lot of non-consensual stuff. And then he maybe is a bit good for a while, and then somebody that's close to him is killed, and then he goes bad again, and he just constantly does this again and again and again in the films. But I think maybe he does have other stuff going on in the comics.
There are more depth to it.
But yes, the point is that some mutants, like the ones who are blue and furry, like Beast and Nightcrawler, are very obviously mutants. So that's kind of where you've got prejudices that people can immediately look at a person and be like, you're the other. And then you've got prejudices where people, much like in the book I was just reading, are hiding their true nature because they're in a society where that's just going to lead to them being persecuted and oppressed. So yes, that's kind of the mutant metaphor, and they can do lots of, I guess, stuff with that and have done.
So this question was about what might.
Yes, why do you like it?
Wasn't that?
Dave was not impressed by the social issues.
I never looked that deep to start with.
But that's people still be drawn in by stuff.
I was an outcast, and I liked the idea of getting superpowers when I was a teenager.
There you go.
Anyone could be a mutant.
Kids. Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty.
It's
much
more the superhero thing. I mean, yes, he's a big comic fan, so that's fair enough. I mean, I'm not like into it to the same extent as Dave, but yeah, I quite like stories and stuff. But again, I think it's mostly because
I think it's also it's
quite fun.
It's the complexity. It's the
but not simple, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's all a bit vague.
If you're interested in a lot of talk about X-Men, there is the podcast Jay and Mars Explain the X-Men.
Explain is spelled.
Yeah, explains with the capital yes. Whereas they say themselves, they walk you through the ins, the outs of superheroes' greatest soap opera. Because it is.
Oh, that was going to be my question. One of my questions I was going to ask you.
Okay. And it's sorry, I'm jumping ahead for you.
No, that's fine. Well, my question is going to be like, so X-Men is like a soap opera, but but not limited by realism.
Yes, it is. It's about.
It's
about I think it's found family.
It's kind of community, isn't it?
Yeah, community, found family. The main characters, have been together for a long time now, or a short amount of time, depending on how you view comic time. But it's about found family. It's about supporting each other and.
I lost the thread. I found it again.
I'll lose the thread quite often in this conversation, but.
It's all a metaphor.
It is all a metaphor. So yes, it is about that. So it is a soap opera in the end.
That book you got me, Chicks Dig Comics, which was a load of essays from Women Who Like Comics. I think they did mention the soap opera of it, because like soap opera is seen as like traditionally as like a women's genre of television. Like, we've got lots of very dramatic things happening to this cast of characters. And I read a thing recently that said the reason soap operas are designed, well, certainly the American style ones anyway, designed as they are, because they were like prime time, daytime TV, and so they have a lot of sound cues. So there'll be like a do, like, I don't know. I mean, Sender has the drums, doesn't it? Boom, 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 like sort of dramatic sound. But they have a lot of musical cues because they knew that the people watching were probably also looking after their home and their kids. So they needed like sound cues, so you knew, a dramatic thing has just happened. And it kind of like they weren't necessarily complex to follow, but there's a lot happening. And there's a lot of different people you could care about. So apparently, I read it was somebody did a whole thread on this on Twitter, but basically that's kind of like looking at a medium. And going, well, how can we adapt this to the audience?
Yeah,
it's respect. But then obviously comics are kind of seen as more of a traditionally masculine interest. But then you've got this thing that is like, absolutely, as you say, a soap opera. But just with lots more crazy stuff like clones and time travel and other dimensions and alternative selves.
Let's be honest, it gets...
mutant powers, which actually are probably the simplest part of the whole thing.
Somewhat, yeah. I mean, the interpersonal relationships between the characters, gets quite can get quite complicated. They've got a lot of history, especially now.
There's a Summers family tree.
There's a Summers family tree, which we do need.
Before I met Dave, so we met through the science fiction society at the university we both went to, which I currently work at. And yes, I think the year before I attended, Dave and a friend who was also in the society and was also a big comic fan, they drew a family tree that was at that point, so early noughties, the kind of family tree of Scott Summers and Jean Grey, and they had to... Well, they couldn't really do it justice because it was only two-dimensional, and they only had certain limited number of colours, but there were clones and time travel and alternate future past selves.
And it doesn't get any less complicated with the... But we don't talk about Death of Genesis.
Okay, I don't know what that is. So, yes.
I could explain, but would be here a while.
This is the problem with so much of this, isn't it?
If anyone's interested, I can do an entire podcast on it. But then again, you could also listen to Jay and Miles do it much better because they work in the industry. They explain it very well. They also work in the industry and have a lot more in-depth views on this than I do. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely worth a listen.
Sure.
It's very good.
So
a lot of episodes though, and they're only up to basically where I started. So Age of Apocalypse have just started, which is early 80s.
Sure, right, yeah, so fun. How long are they anticipating that podcast going for? Presumably a long time.
Well,
I guess they'll keep publishing the comics as well. So obviously X-Men's like a big ensemble thing. There are lots of characters who kind of come and go and stuff. Do you have like a favourite character or like group of characters?
I like saying Cable because he's complicated. And I think that I don't actually like Cable as a character. So, there we go. Cable is the son of Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor.
And who is Madeline Pryor?
Madeline Pryor is a clone of Jean Grey.
Was she Scott's original first wife?
That didn't get married. They weren't married.
She was Scott's original girlfriend.
Yes.
And then she died.
So then she died.
And then she was cloned.
She was cloned before she died.
Okay, well, she was cloned, and then the clone.
And then Scott and Madeline get together.
Does he know she's her clone?
Let's put it this. No, not the point. But let's put it this
way. Is it because of the glasses? Could he not see?
They look. The ridiculous thing is
this woman that I'm going to marry looks exactly like my dad's ex-girlfriend.
All of his friends at the time, the X-Men, never mentioned that. Do you know what? Madeline
she looks a lot like our dead friend.
It really looks like Jean.
She looks exactly the same.
So Cable is this who has to be sent forward in time to save him from a techno-organic virus. So he's taken into the future by his sister from an alternate reality, Rachel Grey, who is the daughter of Jean Grey and the Phoenix Force. Yeah, just
it's like a big fiery space thing.
Yeah. Who then grows up in the future as part of this. I say cult. It's basically he's there to destroy Apocalypse, which he never actually gets around to doing. But then he comes back in time as a adult. In fact, an older adult to stop.
You warn them.
No, to stop things that happen. But the reason I like it, it's complicated, really ridiculously complicated.
I mean, if you don't want complexity, perhaps don't try reading a load of X-Men comics, I guess.
No, it's not Wolverine. I don't like... Well, Wolverine's alright, he's a bit dull.
Has he just been overused a bit? Is it like that one... Like, you've got a band you really like, but then there's that one song and they always play on the radio, and you're like, I like this band, but could you play one of their many other good songs, not just this one song, which is the only one they'll play on the radio?
Wolverine's been done to death and then brought back to life again. It's
that's sort of his thing.
I'm getting on. You've made me lose. Mal's made me lose track.
Yeah,
I'll go back to Cable. So the reason I enjoy Cable as a character concept rather than actual character, because he tends to be
like what he does to the plot rather than what he
big
himself
guns
is doing.
and shooty. Well, also sort of the sort of meta look at how he came about, because he was not originally, the original plan wasn't for this. It was like they kind of picked it up later and threaded it through and fleshed it out and went, well, actually, if we just link these two bits together.
Isn't that happening a lot in comics?
It does, but Cable's a nice,
Okay.
He's also got a clone. Cable's got a clone who's very spiky.
Okay.
Yeah, well. He also was brought up by Scott Summers and Jean Grey.
Jean Grey's not his mother, she's the woman his mother was cloned from.
When their mind...
I know what that means biologically.
Their minds were... When they're on their honeymoons and their minds were projected forward
into
body.
They did eventually get married. She was his second wife at that point, after having come back from the dead. There's a lot of people not really properly dying in
Let's put it this way.
well.
Scott Summers does not come off well on the entire wife...
I don't particularly think I like Scott. He seems quite dull and he has a lot of interesting women around him.
Yeah, he can be interesting, but I think the main problem...
They quite often have him being like the leader guy or the deputy guy, so he's a little bit dull, like in
he's
TV and film.
I keep waving this knife around. That can't be good. Yeah, he makes some really bad decisions. So he's married Madeline Pryor. They're living in Alaska with baby Nathan Summers, and he hears that Jean Grey has come back to life. She's been found at the bottom of Jamaica Bay. Because reasons. So what's he do? He doesn't say, Madeline, I really got to see what's going on.
My life, maybe back.
But I'll be back. Don't worry. No, he just disappears in the middle of the night and never phones them.
Oh, for God's sake! Bloody Cyclops.
I don't think him and Madeline ever end up in the same room again.
Okay, so he's like her deadbeat.
No. End of
How do they get divorced?
Inferno.
Because if he gets remarried,
or does
she die? A lot of people die and then they come back.
She becomes the Goblin Queen during Inferno because, let's be fair, she's not treated particularly well. She learns she's a clone. She realises that Scott's back with Jean. She's managed to mislay the baby, but that's...
I thought the baby was sent to the future.
No, this is before the baby got sent to the future. So she ends up... Yeah, the baby, I can't remember where the baby is at that point. Oh, no, Scott and Jean have him. They're running around being X-Factor with the baby.
Wait, so they have some sort of dangerous job, and so the fact that he ran out on his wife and infant child...
I can't remember how he gave...
Him and the ex get custody, even though he has quite a dangerous job.
It's fine, that the baby can defend itself with telekinetic... It creates a telekinetic bubble around itself when it's in danger.
Right, yeah.
Anyway,
so, this can go on for a while. Kind of a soap opera, but yeah.
Anyway, why do I not like Wolverine?
Oh, okay.
Because they've done it. He was in all of the things. Whereas, when they had Laura Kinney, who's X-23, if you've seen Logan, the film, she was a much better, more interesting Wolverine. But yeah, they ended up bringing regular Wolverine back. I don't actually know how they did that. I really need to find out. Because last time I knew he was encased in adamantium and without a healing factor. So...
That's Wolverine. He gets house scrapes.
Yeah.
That's why he can be on all the teams.
He's the best at what he does. And it's also pretty.
Yes. Do you have a favourite writer or storyline? In the comics?
So, the ones I actually started reading, the ones I kind of started picking up, collecting, was the start of Grant Morrison's run. So I have a soft spot for that. Joss Whedon's run on Astonishing X-Men.
Oh, she showed me this era, right?
Yeah, it wasn't too Joss Whedon-y.
I think he was writing about comic stuff quite a bit. Like, it was a bit meta, but I think I was able to get it because he told me a lot of stuff about it.
You know, you've got some of the classics. Dark Phoenix Saga is an excellent arc.
This is the further tribulations of Jean Grey.
Yeah, but she's not actually. That's the Phoenix at that point. It's not Jean Grey. Anyway, but that's
it's very confusing.
It's a good. You know, it has stakes. It has. I mean, at the time, it did have a death that they wanted to stick. Interesting. Here we go. There's another bit of interesting. So when Chris Claremont was writing, he actually wanted it to be an evolving world. That when people left the team, they left. They went and did other things.
They got other jobs.
They got other jobs.
Stopped and had families.
And they actually people die
from a school.
You know, they would die, or and not come back. So it's quite interesting that they kind of not quite gone completely the other way, but it's
the same people they die and then they come back and then they die and they come back. And we'll just talk about these same group of people. When actually, because like with TV, so with a soap opera, you've got a certain pool of actors, and occasionally they replace people, but then some of those people go because the actor's contract is stopped, or there's been some sort of spat. I mean, it's been a very long time since I watched soap opera, but the one I kind of remember was Joe from Neighbours, who was on a farm. And then he was just on the farm the whole time, and his daughter's getting married, and the mum was a bit like, oh, your dad would love to be here, but you can't leave your granddad on the farm. And I'm like, is he like when a dog dies, and you tell your children it went to a farm, but like with their dad? Anyway, that was back when Holly Valance was on it. That's quite a long time ago. Anyway, I don't know, I'm not current with things. But yeah, but with a comic book, you just keep drawing new people.
Yeah.
Just keep drawing them. So, It
would have been interesting to see how that would have actually worked. I mean, obviously, modern comics are very wrapped up in the characters they've got, and death
because of intellectual property and
death is by no means. But I mean, it depends on how they do it. So when they killed Jean Grey off,
Jean
Grey, the first time.
Okay.
So at the end of the Dark Phoenix Saga, okay, so spoilers if you don't know about the end of the Dark Phoenix Saga.
It's from like the 80s or something though. So.
Yeah. So Jean Grey sacrifices herself because she realises that the Phoenix Force is too much for her, and she can't, after having eaten a planet of broccoli people, which, interesting, was an artistic mistake. There wasn't supposed to be broccoli people on the planet.
Okay.
She was supposed to be. She dives into a sun, eats a sun,
it's healthy.
eats a star, and it destroys a planet. That was the instructions to the artists. The artist drew broccoli people on it. So suddenly it went from the Phoenix Force Jean Grey just devouring a sun, which is bad but not terrible, to she committed genocide.
Oh, okay. At first I thought maybe the artist was working for the broccoli farmers, but maybe he was working against them.
They're just called broccoli people because they're green and broccoli-esque.
Well, there's a whole thing with broccoli in the US, isn't there?
The point is, at that point that the character became irredeemable in comic, because you couldn't have someone who's just committed genocide continue to be in comics. I mean,
at that point,
not as a hero anyway. So there's entire rest of the they go through the Dark Phoenix, and then they fight the Shi'ar Imperial Guard.
These are aliens, basically.
And Jean Grey sacrifices herself because the X-Men can't defeat the Imperial Guard, but they won't stop trying to save her, and she realises that the Phoenix Force is just, she can't contain it, and she sacrifices herself. So at that point she was dead. I'll wrap this bit up.
Okay, sure.
Roll on a bit, and they decide they want to bring back the original 5 X-Men. Because at this point in the comics, or the actual original 5 X-Men were off doing other things. Scott was married to Madeline Pryor. Beast, I think, was off doing research.
Like
Warren Worthington was being a playboy, and I think Bobby Drake had gone back to school, or was he in the defence? Anyway, they wanted to bring back the original, so they had to work out how to bring Jean Grey back from the dead. When but also they couldn't literally bring that Jean Grey back because she ate a planet.
She ate a son, you said.
Well, she ate a son and killed and committed genocide. So that is where it turns out that actually that Jean Grey that sacrificed herself was actually the Phoenix Force, kind of being Jean Grey, and the real Jean Grey was in a pod in Jamaica Bay, which is then found by the Fantastic Four in New York.
Okay.
I'm not sure where I was going with this.
No, I don't know either. What I would say is this kind of reminds me. We have occasionally had conversations about which is more complicated: X-Men continuity in the comics, or like Greco-Roman mythology, which is the thing I know about. Bear in mind that one of them's been around for many thousands of years longer and had a lot more cultural influences on it. But this kind of reminds me a little bit of the whole Eidolon thing with Helen of Troy. Because obviously Helen of Troy is kind of blamed for a big old war, although it seems like she had limited choice in many of the things that happened, let's face it. So then the 10-Year War and, thousands of deaths and things like that. And then she gets taken back to Greece, and it's a bit like, oh, but, she's now the Queen of Sparta again, and has come back to the child that she abandoned, or was taken from, depending on your viewpoint. But then there's a version that says that actually the Helen that got taken to Troy was a fake lady made of clouds. The Eidolon, something like that. And that the real Helen was actually hiding in Egypt the entire time and never actually abandoned her family, although they thought she did. Well, she didn't go to Paris. So it's kind of a bit like, oh, well, we're just going to kind of redeem her. So she's actually somewhere else. So I'm just saying they're using similar...
It is, similar motifs,
Yeah. But yes.
As Man was saying about having characters leave or move on can bring its own problems. Batman-related characters have moved on over the years, but they need to bring in new side characters. And then at this point, hundreds of people know who Batman is. That's a fair point. I mean, with the X-Men...
Yeah, they're not secret, aren't they?
For Batman, because that's a definite secret identity thing. With X-Men...
He brands everything.
They don't
branding on it. Somebody's painting those bats on things. It's probably a sweatshop worker in China.
It's easier to bring... So they have new generations of mutants come through. So it was...
Because it's a school,
yeah,
theoretically. Like a lot of the TV series is like, this is a school.
Yeah.
People go to the school and it's also horrendously dangerous.
So they have
there's a jet.
The first new was there's the New Mutants, then Generation X, and then there's been a few more series where they... But in order to introduce more characters, you just bring in a new generation.
Can't you? So you
and
the character designs and stuff, and like they had a woman who's hijabi.
Yes.
Although she turned to sand, so yeah. So you're a bit like, oh, okay. So they've got like a Muslim character who wears a veil, but also turns into sand. You're like, well, that because she was actually Arabian, wasn't she? It's like, okay.
The problem is that sometimes they can be very on the nose with powers. Let's be honest.
Do any of the gay characters shoot rainbows yet, or have they not quite gone that far?
No, not quite.
Not quite.
But
they have had quite a few. They've had a few gay weddings, haven't they? In X-Men, have they? Or was that a different one?
Yes, North Star, and I really can't remember.
There were two of the Canadian ones, weren't they?
It's North Star, and I can't remember
his husband.
Yes, because his husband's a regular human.
Oh, okay.
And
he doesn't have a funny code. See, everyone has their regular name, they also have a fun code name. But unlike most superheroes, where there's secret identity, you don't know with the mutants. They're all just mostly public, because as I say, some of them are obviously that. And if you hang around with a load of other people who are like blue or whatever, then you know they're probably mutants. The thing that interests me is that... So people hate mutants in this universe, but they're fine with superheroes, even though both sets have powers. And it's kind of this weird thing about, I think, going back to the mutant metaphor, is like, oh, we're discriminating against these people because they're the wrong kind of powered people. Like Captain Marvel and Spider-Man are fine. Well, how anyone doesn't know if Spider-Man's a mutant or not because he's wearing a mask, but people have secret identities, so you don't know if they're mutants or not.
Yeah.
But some people are fine and they're heroes, and then mutants are just like, muties, and
there's
it's all
definitely...
a bit... It's a bit weird, but then again, bigotry is often like that, because people are a bit like, oh, men cannot wear skirts, except if they're Scottish and they're called kilts, or if they're those Middle Eastern garments, that I can't remember what they're called. You know, it's just like we've got all these very specific lines that when you look at it, you go, well, this doesn't make a lot of sense. So
yeah,
I don't know if that was on purpose or just because they like to smash comics together, even though they've got quite different things going on.
There's certainly a bit where the X-Men are hanging out in LA, as you do. and they're trying to raise their public profile, so they go and save the city. And sort of the Fantastic Four turn up because they're in the neighbourhood after they'd saved it.
New York, okay.
They move around a lot. They're in Australia for a long time. And basically they're kind of the X-Men are getting booed, and they're pointing out this like, we've just done exactly what the Fantastic Four would have done.
How do people not know how do they know the Fantastic Four are mutants? Their children are mutants, aren't their children mutants?
Yes.
There you go. So you see, it's weird.
It's all a bit strange. Anyway.
But then again, like, bigotry is often very nonsensical. Do you have a favourite film of the various films that there have been recently? Which, I mean, the films can get a bit confusing on what's going on, but as you can see, the source material is just like everywhere. So
X2.
X2.
Mainly, it was the first X-Men one was good, but
sort of introduced it.
That was X2 built on it. You had a lot more. It was the sequence with Nightcrawler at the start.
I do like that version of Nightcrawler.
The promise that was let down by the.
So this is the other thing I've written down. What I've written down here is it time to confront your feelings about Last Stand? Is it time?
Why could they not do a good Dark Phoenix film?
So, the thing with this came out it was my second year of uni, so this would be like 2005.
I suppose there's background to this.
2005,
end of X2, we're sitting in the cinema.
See, I didn't see this, I wasn't around then.
So it's me,
uni,
with a group of friends who, sci-fi, me and Chris Paul were sitting next to each other, because, big X-Men fan. And at the bottom, sitting there watching, and at the end is this.
You think Jean's kind of sacrificed herself for everyone else?
There's this phoenix. There's this fire shape underneath that looks like a bird, and you're thinking, and throughout, she's been doing fiery things and eyes, and you just know it's building. You know exactly what you know exactly where they're going with it. Coming. So.
And then the trailer for X3 was very good. There was the bridge, and there was... Ralph had a whole dance for it. He did a dance, but na. I think that might also have been around the time... Was it Franz Ferdinand or Kaiser Chiefs?
Possibly. And the trailer...
And those bands named after them to the World War.
The trailer was a trailer. It was there to get your interest. And it was some nice set pieces. But
then Bryan Singer went to do Superman Returns and took James Marsden with him. So they have just killed Cyclops. So they've gone to a different film.
There are some things that you just, that are there within the X-Men Phoenix mythology, and they didn't do any of it.
I think the thing was...
She wasn't even on fire!
She wasn't, but also she lost all her personality, so it's not Famke Janssen's fault, but, I don't think they gave her anything to do, because it's like, Jean has come back from dead, yay. Oh, her boyfriend sort of disappeared. Was he atomised? It seems like he was atomised. And then she atomised some other people. Is that what was that? Well, I think that's what they're doing. And then it's like, oh, she's so powerful. More powerful than anything. But the more power she had, the less personality she had. She also did that thing that particularly women do when they turn evil. It's like, I have suddenly found the local goth shop and will buy stuff only from there. So it's like, she's wearing black. She's had a goth makeover. She's standing there with no personality, which is not how most goths are, or at least the ones that we know. And it's just like, so that was a bit. They just didn't do any of the things. They kind of made Magneto a little bit Bin Laden-y, like he was hiding in a cave, which, I mean, it was 2005.
The whole mutant cure thing.
Oh yeah.
Which again, they just
that was sort of interesting. They seemed to put a lot of stuff into it, and
they just packed too much into the film. So basically, it wasn't even a good film. There was just too much wrong with it.
They kind of killed Professor Xavier again. He just got exploded or something. Not literally.
So it was just so much of a disappointment to.
So Davis for many years maintained that it was simply a trailer, and also a makeup test in which Kelsey Grammer was Beast, because Kelsey Grammer was all blue and furry, and him and Patrick Stewart in scenes together.
Right.
And that's I would say that's always fun, but I suppose. It's fun in that episode of Frasier that Patrick Stewart is in when they're ballroom dancing, because that's amazing, and that's generally quite a funny episode. I suppose there's also an episode of TNG that Kelsey Grammer is in, but he's in for literally 5 seconds, and it's a bit like, well, what? So,
yeah. So this is what X2, wonderful film. X3, Last Stand.
So have none of the new ones overtaken X2 for you? Like First Class or the one after First Class that was called something else? What was that one called?
I enjoyed Days of Future Past.
Yes, that one. That was the one after the one I can't remember the name of. What happened to
So First Class didn't really do much with the Xavier Magneto.
Well, I think they were going for a character. Like, I think McAvoy and Fassbender did quite well together, but it wasn't like, here are two people who are working together for the rights of their people, then they have an ideological schism that sets the movement back by ages because there's infighting rather than focus. It's just like, these two guys worked together for a while and got on quite well, and then they had a disagreement and they stopped working together, and one of them
there wasn't
now
enough,
needs a wheelchair.
There wasn't enough to really, impact that, and they... I didn't... The Hellfire Club wasn't really well represented. Poor Em Frost.
Did we feel bad for her?
I felt bad for the actress.
Yes, that's... Yeah.
I feel bad for a lot of people in that film. So it just wasn't, and then, so...
Was that the one, the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Yeah.
What was the next one? Have I made up one in between?
No, Days of Future Past, Apocalypse...
Apocalypse. That's the
one afterwards.
Was it? Oh, yeah.
And then
there's that one we haven't
Phoenix.
seen.
Dark Phoenix.
Which you haven't seen.
No, I haven't seen. Yeah.
Okay. Is it because you're afraid of having been burned, or more accurately, not suitably burned enough because there was not enough fire?
As I understand it, it's slightly better.
Is that the one where they had a scene in space and they put on the bus, or the other way around?
Anyway.
There was something about a space bus. Yeah, Apocalypse wasn't great. It felt like it was a waste of Oscar Isaac.
Apocalypse is supposed to be... Apocalypse... Yeah, just
it's
doesn't...
It's like, oh, that's the guy that was like...
If they were introducing him to then do Age of Apocalypse afterwards, that might have been alright. But they still wasted it.
I think the thing is, a lot of this was originally told in a very long form thing. And obviously a film is like 2 and a bit hours.
I think Days of Future Past was an interesting experiment in tying the two timelines together.
Yes. Because you had both McAvoy and Stewart.
Yeah, it had its problems, but certainly if you watch the extended...
They had Ellen Page in a bit more.
Yeah, the extended edition. That was cool. I mean, they couldn't do the original Days of Future Past where they sent Kitty Pryde back, because obviously you have to deal with actual actors and actresses. So that's why it had to be Wolverine doing it.
I think that's why they made Logan, because like Hugh Jackman is aging, and we will not judge him for that because he is a human and we will do it. But he is aging.
Logan is excellent.
Wait, is Logan better? Logan feels very different though, because everyone's swearing. It's a different film. Professor X said the F word.
It's a different film. It's an X-Men film. But
it's really heavy, but really well done. But Jesus, is it heavy?
Yeah. So no, the Logan is excellent. But yeah.
Yes. No, you're right. It doesn't feel like it's part of the same What's It.
No.
But you can kind of do that with comics, I guess.
Oh yeah, you can. It's great. That is the advantage of it. There's lots of things you can do with them.
Yeah.
Lots of adaptability.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So yes, but you have at least now on record acknowledged that Last Stand was in fact an entire film that you did see. I saw it twice. That's because Dave wanted it first, and then I was running the Sci-Fi Society at that point. Was I running it? Or as a secretary? No, it was Ralph had Dance. Anyway, I was quite happy, and I sort of thought I should go. Any two other people went, but we didn't have to pay for it because Rob was working at the cinema at the time. So
that was a plus point.
But yeah, I did see it twice, and the second time was a bit like, okay. Yeah. It had some good set piecey bits, but yeah.
Yeah, that's what we can say.
Yeah.
Was there any more questions?
No, that was the main thing. I thought I'd leave Last Stand till the end in case there was a great emotional moment.
But I'm interested to see the Dark Phoenix, the whatever they call it, recent one. I'll watch it.
I don't think
but
was it called that. I don't know.
I'm not holding out much. I mean, in some respects, one of the better pieces in Apocalypse was when Jean Grey walks out.
The younger ones I thought were quite good in Apocalypse. I kind of wish I had more of them. And then there was that they had some teasers online where they went to the mall, and I was like, oh, this is quite fun.
Yeah, they were really bad.
And had Jubilee and stuff, but they weren't in the film that much. Like, these kids seem fun, but now they've kind of gone.
Certainly the actress that played Storm was really harshly treated. Not badly treated, as in badly treated, but the characterisation and what she had
screen. She was hardly in it, was
she?
Exactly.
Yeah.
At least Halle Berry's going quite a bit to do. And then she was left in charge of the school. And things were like, she would be in charge of the school. But then the comics Wolverine was in charge of the school. I'm like, what's happened here? Where is everyone else?
So yes, that's X-Men is a long. We could come back to this again, on different specific subjects, but
I think we do a general overview, and then we'll see. We've got various things we can split up into stuff. I said not to X-Men because I've not read all the things. I've just heard you explain them in exactly this manner.
Yeah, there is a lot of X-Men. The current stuff's quite interesting as well.
Okay, fair enough.
Well,
it's just stuff like House of M, which I vaguely know.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Well, currently, so they really messed with the status quo. This will be the last thing because it's actually quite interesting. They've
more than House of M.
They've played with mutants can no longer die. Well, they can die, but they can be brought back.
That's always the case. You just explained it.
No, but they no. So
none of them's out.
Working with Mr. Sinister, they have a DNA record of every single mutant.
Is this like the transporters on Star Trek?
Yeah. On a weekly basis.
Our friend has died, but they're in the transporters, so they're back now. They've just lost half an hour. We'll not question the ethics of this.
On a weekly basis, Professor Xavier uses Cerebro to mentally back up every single mutant psyche.
Is everyone given consent for this instantly?
No.
Oh, well, what?
There's series they're going to do with these things.
Okay, well, you hope so.
And they have 5 mutants whose powers work together to basically, if you die, they could bring you back. So you don't have the memories for the last...
Like the transporter thing I just mentioned.
Yeah. But you basically brought back. So yeah, and they've got...
Are they even bothering doing the bigotry stuff anymore? Because it sounds like the biggest, the angry bit. It's like die mad about it because I won't.
So the island that I mentioned right at the start, where the captured the original X-Men. So one of its seeds, they've got this basically giant sentient island, but it's able to grow drugs, good drugs, not the
medicine.
So, yes, thank you. But basically, they have medicine that can cure.
You know, people can already grow drugs. That's what like.
But they can make cure pretty much anything.
Okay. Does everyone have access to this, or just mutants?
Yeah. So basically,
this is the problem with superhero stuff. It's like Tony Stark can like power himself for 50 lifetimes. Does he power the small city with cheap renewable energy? He has not.
If the governments accept that the islands of Krakoa is a mutant nation, the rights of mutants and the thing, they have access to these drugs.
Okay, so sort of holding it hostage, but kind of not being oppressed.
Yeah,
But at what point does it tip over into them being like the superpower?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't got that far in it because pandemic.
Sure.
So,
your comments were delayed.
Yeah. So
also, we haven't watched the most recent X-Men film, but it wasn't out of protest. It's just we don't watch films as much as we used to because we have a kid.
Well, once it comes on,
if
it comes on Disney
one of the streaming services. Oh yeah, Disney. Okay.
So yes. Anyway, we should wrap this up because it's now getting to 9:45, and so.
We should have known the X-Men one would be on the long side.
Yes.
So apologies for length. Right. So I've basically, I've basically finished my swan. So that's the like main sort of body of the swan done. I will probably put some water underneath it at some point. I need to decide what I'm sewing next. There's a couple of things I could be doing, but we'll see. Yeah.
I made 2 feet. Yeah, they're the inner frame. It takes a while to build these Gundams. And I was talking and didn't want to use a knife while I was talking, so in a frame of a Gundam takes a while.
Since all the crafts are doing these sharp things, we mine just pins and needles. So our plan is to do another episode next week, because then we've been doing it 2 weekly before. But 2 weeks from today is over halfway through my very busy long week, and is also the evening before the longest working day of my year, which we're now doing from home this year because pandemic. So yes, I don't know how I will be, but sleeping would probably be a good idea.
So not in 2 weeks' time, definitely next week. No idea what we're talking about.
Well, we'll figure that. We don't use announce beforehand.
Well, we do up until when we put the announcement on Facebook. Anyway, if you want to catch these back, we now have a YouTube channel. We don't have enough subscribers to have a fancy YouTube name yet. We need 100.
Oh, is that how that works? What's a fancy YouTube name? He knows about YouTube, not me.
Well, we can have it'll be YouTube / Cathy and Day.
Oh, so you can link to the videos but not to the channel?
Yeah, we don't.
Oh, okay, right. Sure. Oh, I didn't know that was how that worked.
Yeah, 100 subscribers. So if you'd like to subscribe to our channel and help us, subscribe.
If you feel more people should watch us rambling.
Yeah, please do. But if you want to watch back, They are there. It's easier to find them on Facebook because I have trouble finding them on Facebook when I want to download them. So I don't expect anyone else to be able to find them. But yes, you can go back and watch completely unedited versions of these. So
it's like it's live, but not. Yeah.
Other than that,
yeah. So stay safe.
Stay safe, everyone. We shall see you
next week.
The
same time.
Just check over. Don't want to use a knife while talking, but waving it about was fine.
Okay.
Fair point, Mal. Fair point. There might be a reason why I have a few scars. Anyway, I would just also say thank you to Chris Mal and Kate Middleton for providing us with information when we were too lazy to look on Google ourselves.
We're doing a recording now.
Thank you to them, and other than that, we'll leave now.
Yes. Thank you. Stay safe. Bye bye.
Bye bye.